welcome everyone back to Futsal News Live. Of course, Jake here, Luke here, and our special guest tonight, extra special guest, is Jared Klepal with FCS, Futsal
Jared
Champions
Jabroni
Series.
Klepal.
That's right. We got a little inside joke going here behind the scenes with jabronis. We're bringing it back. The 90s were great, and we won't let anybody else tell us otherwise. So we wanted to start the year off right, and Luke and I have had the joy and honor of working with Jared quite a bit over the last couple months, and I think we've got an interesting story to tell. So wanted to get in front of the camera and just kind of ad lib it up and review FCS. So before we do, though, wanted to get to know Jared for the viewers at home. Jared, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found futsal?
Sure thing. Well, first, I have to say it's been a true delight of mine to work with you guys for FCS Live. I mean, coming into this, we'll probably get into a little bit more live streaming stuff later, but, I was doing some of this stuff kind of solo, and working with you guys has been just amazing. It's just like allowed us to take steps, and I feel very encouraged and very like put it into a place where I can succeed when I'm working with you guys. So it's been awesome to have you guys. As far as how I got involved in futsal, my first interaction with futsal was just a mistake. Pretty much every soccer player's mistake. I grew up playing soccer, and it's winter. We want to play soccer. We go to our church gym. We find out about something called a futsal ball, and we're like, this is amazing, right? The ball doesn't bounce everywhere. This is great. And then it wasn't until probably, I don't know, 7-8 years later that I find out about futsal being an actual sport. And that was through my brother, Jeremy, who, if you guys are familiar with the futsal world, you probably know Jeremy Klepal. That's my brother. He's amazing. And also, I would not be here today if it wasn't for him. So I'll probably talk more about him later, because literally I was telling someone this yesterday. I was like, there's like so many things in my life that are just so connected with him. And I hold such an honor for him. I mean, not only is he my brother, but he just is a great encourager in my life, and it's just amazing. God has used him in my life in so many ways to like just everything that I do is like usually in some way is sourced back to the Lord working through him, which is amazing. So that's kind of how I got involved with futsal. Was I found out about it, by playing as a soccer player, and then my brother found out about it with his pursuit of wanting to play soccer at a high level, and then that switched to futsal. And he's got his own amazing story of his journey, and but that's how I got into it. And I've been ever since Lansing City started, where we were playing at a college in Lansing, Michigan. I remember my brother was like, hey, here's this like $200 DJ board. I just bought you. Like, do you want to live like music and DJ our games? And I was like, sweet. And that was like my first interaction with really a game of futsal in the States.
That's awesome. Well, and you've spent some time on the court with Jeremy as well, too, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I played for Lansing City. I don't know the exact years, but it was a few years. When I was in high school and the college age, they had kind of like a secondary like pro team, and I was on like the secondary team, and then I got rostered for the pro team for a few years. We really during the period that Lansing City was actually kind of like taking some trips to like Maryland and to Boston and to Baltimore. I was a part of those teams in the MLF. Got to play against Sporting Maryland. They were a very good team, obviously at their place over in Maryland. And that was like my first time on a plane, was actually riding to, go play futsal. We had like a East Coast journey. I think we played Philly, Boston, and New Jersey, I think is what we did on that trip. So so for probably like 3 years or so, I was on the pro team. But I was also like on the reserve squad for other time before that, and trained with them for quite some time.
That's cool. Well, now you find yourself in a bit of a different position behind the microphone and in front of and behind the camera. What tell us a little bit about that side of your life and kind of how it's found its way intertwined with what your brother's doing.
Yeah, well, you're probably going to find out as we talk about things like this. It's most things that happened in my life. Jeremy was involved, and it was just kind of happened. That's usually how things went, at least from my point of view, So as far as starting to commentate and to produce games, that started in, let's see. Well, the root of it really started when I mentioned when Lansing City first started. We were playing at this college called Great Lakes Christian College, and in one of their gyms in Lansing, Michigan, and that's where Lansing City had their first games. And Jeremy was a part of it, and put it on this team, and he wanted me to basically DJ the games and be like the live producer and announcer. I'd always had interest in those kinds of things, and so he literally bought me a board. It was like $250, Serato DJ board, and was like, sponsor, by the way. And he like gave it to me and was like, "Hey, I want you to like do this for the games." And so I just like played fun music and I announced the teams. And so that was kind of like where it started, because that eventually, when it came time to stream games, I had already been involved in Lansing City in production. That started actually not with the futsal team, though. It started with the USL 2 team. And that, I believe, they finished their third year last year. I think this is going to be Lansing City's fourth year. So if I'm not mistaken, that was my brother approached me and asked me if I wanted to help produce that stream, because we were actually going to, USL 2, you have to have a stream, and Lansing City had just started as a USL 2 team. So I was like, sure, yeah, let's go for it. And then that was only production, so that was just working through graphics and layout and everything like that. Well, I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 games in, one of the commentators, who's the play-by-play guy, couldn't make it. And so my brother texted me, like, it was probably the day of. It honestly might have been the day before, but he was like, "Hey, our play-by-play guy is out. Like, do you want to do it?" And I was like, "I've never done this before. Like, I don't know, even the Lansing City teams. I don't really even know who, like, all the players on this team. But I'll give it a shot." And I did give it a shot. And I definitely had my beginner moments for sure. I remember this one time I was literally like, I just didn't know what to say. And the ball like got shot like out of bounds or something. And I just like froze and then like waited 2 seconds. And I just said, "Oh, wow." And that was it. Like that was it. And I was like, what am I doing? But it was a blast. And over the course of that season, my brother who owned the team was like happy with what I was doing. And so he was like, "Hey, let's continue to do this." So the next couple of years, I continued to do that. And that's how I got started. And of course, this year is the first year that we've been doing anything with the futsal side. So
that's cool. So just to create some perspective of timelines, maybe for people listening in, around the time that Jared was getting involved with the USL side of Lansing, Luke and I were pestering Jeremy about why he doesn't stream inside that beautiful arena. So
I pestered him sometimes too. I did, to be honest. And yeah, I don't know what he told you, but he definitely gave me an answer. I don't know if he ever gave you guys an answer.
Yes. Yes. But I think, what was kind of cool was Jeremy is actually one of the first people I spoke to offline before I started this channel, or around the beginning of the channel, a little over 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, actually. And we had a really, really good conversation. And I think one of the things that cracks me up the most about your brother, and I've learned this, of course, now with several conversations over the years, and then working with FCS this year, is I kept, again, pestering is the only way to word it. I was pestering him like, "You got to come on and do a live interview with me. You got to, you know so much. This is like the best place in the country for futsal in your backyard. No one outside of Lansing is really talking about it. They should be." And he told me that he didn't trust himself in front of a live mic. He's like, "No, I'll say something. Like, I can't. I just can't." So
That's funny.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of funny. And then as things evolved and continued on, and I did things, and what's funny is he also had a really honest conversation with me, which kind of motivated me in a big way. Was that I've seen so many of these podcast style things come and go, and they don't have any longevity. They don't do anything for the sport. And his advice was, if you're going to do this, be honest, be transparent, don't be a cheerleader, and just talk about the good stuff. And so that really encouraged me, because my vision was to touch the good and the bad, because we need a spotlight on the sport, and that kind of gilded like the idea that, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do. So then over this last spring, of course, it evolved into working with the league. So shortly after that, you and I started talking, and networking, the wonders of networking happened. And I think it's been really fun, and we've done some cool stuff. So
now we're jabronis.
Now we're jabronis. That's right. The jabronis.
The jabronis.
But I think that what we've done from a production perspective for the league has not been done before, at least that I'm aware of within the United States. And I think that we've really raised the bar, and I think we've done it in a pretty affordable way, because I know a lot of people are fearful of the investment and just lack of knowledge around what it takes to get this done. And with Luke's experience and then your experience. And,
sorry, Luke's
there it is.
He's changing the names.
I saw the title change. But I think we've accomplished a lot, and it certainly takes some time. And we've invested a lot of time into this little project. But can you talk? One of you guys want to talk a bit about what we've done to make this happen, Luke or Jared, as far as what is required in the background?
Sure, Luke, you want to take it?
I mean, yeah, I don't. Have we talked on this channel like live, Jake, about my involvement in Rudy? So we'll shout this out because royalty is in chat, y'all.
That's right.
Mr. Ben Rudy's in the chat. Nice graphics on Lansing's Streamcast. Oh yeah, he's referring to that's a Jared Klepal rollout for these past couple streams, which is, to be honest with you, like in the past, and I'm sure Jared can attest to this, that when you're working solo and when you're working with just a little resources, it's a lot just to keep the stream on and be filming. But in the beginning, like I said, I'm not sure if we talked about this, so if we're rehashing it, I apologize. But I showed up in a Grand Rapids Olay stream, and it was on 11, I think. And Jake was in there. I started chatting with Rudy, who's here, and Juan, who's the manager of Olay. And I'm like, this stream is not good. Like, this is really bad. Like, it was choppy. And I was trying to be the nicest I could because, who knows what's going on. But, immediately Juan and Rudy are like, hey, what? I mean, would you like to help? And I'm like, well, I have 20 years experience, I'm down. And they're like, okay, come on. And I was like, sure, let's see what happens. And they fully just took me into the fold with Grand Rapids Olay. They're like, you're on, do everything. And I'm like, you don't even know me. So luckily I'm a halfway decent guy. But I came up with this whole system of, good old 11 Sports. Yeah, Rudy.
Yeah, USL used to use 11. I don't know if they had to, but we used 11 for like our first 1 or 2 years, and it wasn't bad, but there were some things that were kind of weird about it.
Yeah.
But
what I came up with is I was like, there's got to be a way to make things easier. There's just got to be a way to make things easier. So I did like a lot of research, and shout out to Steve. I forgot his last name, but the creator of Video.Ninja. He made this during COVID. It's a kind of just a Zoom call on steroids. You can make it as big or as small as you want. We're actually using it right now. But it's a way for coaches or futsal team owners that don't want to have to do anything with streaming to take like a cell phone and just like click a button and you're streaming. And it's basically just a webcast to me in Idaho, and they're streaming it from Grand Rapids to Idaho, and then I send it to YouTube. It ended up working really good, but that's the genesis of it all with me. And then I would just kind of add my like spice onto it with like replays and a few simple graphics. But yeah, Jared with the team here, what Jared was mentioning earlier is just really great because now we can start to fold in more. We can do more graphics. We can do more live with more hands on deck. It's just so much easier. And all of these guys can attest to like just how much work is involved with keeping a live stream going. It's just a lot.
Yeah. And if I were to say something about keeping a live stream going, where we're at right now, I'm recognizing this too. So what you said is so true. Like, to go live with quality it definitely takes it's a bigger step than most people know. I think when people watch TV, they realize that there's a lot that goes into a production, but I think even now, I still don't understand what goes into like a massive TV production. And I'm like looking at the little things we're doing, and I'm like, they must just be bananas level. Like, I don't even know how to say it other than that. Like, it's just crazy. But one thing that I'm learning, even where we're at right now, is that we're kind of at a point where taking another step, it's kind of exponential, the difficulty of that step. So there's already a step of like starting, which is tough. And one of the main reasons why it's tough at the beginning is because there's a lot of variables that can go wrong. So could you just like get a phone out and like open up a YouTube app and just like go for it? Yeah. And like, maybe that would work. Like maybe that would, but then it's like, okay, now we want to have commentators. Okay. If we want to do that, then can we just use a phone? Now we may have to have a computer, unless we have like something that can hook up to the phone that can be commentators. And then every time you add something, there's just like pieces in the background that have to all mesh together. So what I'm finding now is like, to get from nothing to one, like 0 cameras to 1 camera is like a certain level of difficulty. And then once you go from like 1 to 2 or 3, now it's like the difficulty, I think, is exponential. And then I think once you get past like going from 3 to 4 or 5 is probably not as big of a difference. At least that's my guess. And maybe I'll be wrong once we get to that point, but that's my guess, because once you have more than 1 camera, it's like, okay, now my computer needs multiple inputs, and now I need to have communication with my team, and I need the communication channels to be separate and custom. And then like, once you have all that in place, then it's like, okay, now we're just adding more pieces to what we've built. But that's kind of, 100%, going live with any kind of quality in any scenario is a tough thing. And once you start adding things to it, then you really start to find how deep that difficulty can be, because of all the things that, like, you add one thing and it means 20 other things have to fit that. And so that's totally true.
Rudy says
yeah.
we need a TV truck for the league. That's close to the truth. You may be seeing a TV truck to a local Grand Rapids Olay game near you.
I drive a Ford Fusion, and that's what's going to be out there. So if that makes any difference,
it's the League Fusion.
The League Fusion.
Yep.
I'm going to jump over to a question from Birmingham Futsal that we have live, and that is, what are some of the major factors that make a league sustainable? And then another question, what are some recommendations for groups who may be more isolated from other futsal teams and programs? So to start with the first question.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
I know nothing. So who is Birmingham Futsal? Because I know nothing.
Oh, yeah. So Birmingham Futsal is a friend of the channel, Tristan Tillett, who is down in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay,
and,
amazing.
They've got a great program down there. They've done some really cool stuff with getting some of their youth over to specifically Portugal. They've had a lot of success.
Very cool.
Partnering with Sporting CP, one of the best teams in Europe, possibly the world. And
we've also had Tristan on the channel.
That's right. Yeah. So you need to go back and watch that interview, mister.
Sweet.
Double jabroni now. But the question, but as far as the question to the major factors that make a league sustainable, Tristan, for me, I can only speak for what is working for us right now, I think. But what's working for us is we are trying to put as much power and enablement into the clubs as we possibly can. So part of the reason I'm here, a part of FCS, is I am a neutral person that doesn't have another club affiliation and isn't distracted. It's not the right word, but I don't have enough on my plate that I'm trying to run a club and a league, which we see a lot in the United States. And a lot of times there's an academy behind that club as well that takes time. So my hope and my vision is to take as much work off of the rest of the league's plate as possible, and do kind of the tasks that aren't fun, that aren't sexy, and don't end up on camera, and manage the process from behind the scenes. So I think that for us to create a sustainable league, we need to empower sustainable clubs. And the first step to doing that is trying to limit their costs of entry. So I think one of the things that's really interesting about our business model, and Jared, this is something you can talk to as well, because we've been working on this quite a bit behind the scenes, is building us up to a point through this production we're talking about to sell ad space for the league and become self-sustaining away from the traditional route of league fees. So we've created a model where the league participants aren't paying the league fee. We're going to try and fund ourselves so that they can continue to grow and build that sustainability on their own. And then as far as recommendation for what to do for more isolated futsal teams and programs, I think I would probably point to the Southwest Division in the NFPL as a successful group of guys that have done that right. They lean very heavily on finding sponsors in the off season to fund their travel. So, from Denver, Colorado to Santa Fe, New Mexico, or Albuquerque or Phoenix, Arizona is not cheap. It almost ultimately is a flight. The rest of these guys are driving at least 7 to 8 hours to each other. That takes rentals and fuel and overnights. And it's not a perfect answer, but that's probably, what teams need to consider if they want to get to that amateur level status of what leagues are at right now. It's just finding a way to find that funding and continue to stay passionate, find other passionate people that are in it for the right reasons and not for trying to make a quick buck, because I don't think that exists in our sport yet. What do you guys think?
I think I'll chime in next. I don't mean to cut you off, Jared, if you're in. But one thing I think, I'll kind of I'll echo what Jake is saying is that, I think from all the stuff we hear from behind the scenes, which we're behind the scenes a lot, is kind of cultivating more of a culture of business-minded team owners. I know, Jake and I have talked about this a lot. There's a lot of people who like futsal. There's a lot of people who play futsal, but there's not a lot of people who understand kind of the sports ownership aspect of it. And not to slight anyone out there with a team, but I just know that from what I've seen is the business chops are quite a bit, and you got to be savvy and you got to be on your toes. And again, I'll shout out David Fresquez down in Santa Fe doing a tremendous job. He's leaning on his city. He's actually asking, Santa Fe, the city, to kick in on the team and giving back to the community. He's working with the community, working with local business. Every time I see him, he's hustling some way, shape, or form. He's just out there doing it. And I think, until you can secure those, pro league status, that's where you're at. You're on a hustle, you're on a grind, and that needs to be for every team. And it is what it is. The small man's got to run, and you got to sweat, and you got to do the hard work. So I just think a lot of people will have to have more of that mentality and less of the mentality of leaning on, hey, what can the league do for us? What can you do for yourself? How can you sustain your team?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of owning that backyard. I've been really preaching it the last few months. And, a lot of teams are in our space, I think, are birthed from an individual or group of people that love to play. And so, like Luke said, there's not quite that in-depth, boring business aspect of futsal that nobody wants to do. And I think that's why a lot of teams don't make it. But we've been fortunate. We found a lot of quality people over the last couple of years and across multiple leagues that and people who aren't affiliated with the league yet that are figuring it out. So I'm a big fan of going slow to go fast. I don't like to grow too fast in my professional life either. I like to have some consistency and know that things are sustainable before I expound on what I'm already doing. But I think that's important too. Don't just grow a league count or join a league just for that quick pop of a quick Instagram post that you get the big numbers. I think it's bigger than that if you want to really create the sustainability and be in it for a long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do we want to attack the second part of that question?
Which part? Sorry.
What were some recommendations for groups who may be more isolated from other futsal teams programs?
Yeah, I think like what the Southwest is doing with the sponsorships kind of ties into that as well. That isolation is tough because the geography of the United States is so large, and we're not at a professional level yet. That's just the reality. We're still, like I said, there's no money yet. So, I think that actually, one of the things I think Birmingham Futsal does really, really well is they have a really great local following, and they have a really strong adult league there that does very well. And I think I've found that the teams that are kind of in similar situations are kind of picking and choosing their trips. So I believe, Tristan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you guys are making a trip to Atlantic City this year for the big regional tournament there, which I think is great. That's where all the best competition goes. I know a couple of our teams from FCS will be participating in that as well. Um, I know that there's teams that are finding friendlies. Lansing has played some friendlies with some teams outside of the league over the course of the offseason and downtime within the league. I believe Midwest has as well, with some cross-league competition and friendlies. So there's a lot of going to Charlotte next week. Oh, nice. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so managing that and doing it slowly and expanding slowly, I think probably works really well. Maybe Atlantic City. Okay, I might have got those mixed up. The Charlotte one's, I think, a United Futsal one, right? I believe so. But yeah, I think that's something that's huge. And we're fortunate here in the the Midwest is a broad term, but the real Midwest is Ohio and Michigan and Indiana and maybe another one. I don't know. But for now, that's all it is. But the true heart of the Midwest is there. And so for me, we're fortunate that Cincinnati's our outlier of all the teams, and that's still only a 4.5-5 hour drive max. So a team has to do it one time during the season. Now Cincinnati has to travel that 5 times, so they've got a little tougher challenge. But compared to what leagues have done in the past for divisions, this is actually extremely manageable drive time.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's relative. I did a lot with some of our friends of the channel in Northern Ireland last year and talked quite a bit with them in their situation. And, I was talking to Darius Ruhi, who's on the Northern Ireland national team out there and has been to the preliminary rounds of the UEFA Champions League for futsal. And, he was talking about how, man, if you ask somebody in Northern Ireland to travel more than 40 minutes, that they're going to complain. And you guys are traveling 4 or 5 hours. So you drive more than an hour here, you're in the ocean. So yeah, it's a little different here. We got a little more land to
you got to
drive.
change your mode of transportation after an hour.
That's right.
Yeah, like he was. Oh, Cincinnati is in Kentucky. Call Rudy. that leans into some interstate rivalries in my head, so I'm not going to open that can of worms. But you're right. It's basically Kentucky. One fancy bridge, and I think they're in Ohio. But speaking of the teams, Jared, what do you think about how the season's gone so far? Not only behind the scenes, but working with these teams, but how the competition's going so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think based on what we've seen so far, I think there's the majority of teams are competing very well. I think there's one team that has not competed well, and it's not hard to see that. I was actually on the stats of it today. I think it's like a negative 68 goal differential, which is like, it's sometimes so hard to say, but like this is just reality. Like I don't mean to bash anybody or to talk bad about anybody. This is just the reality. There's one team that is far below, the skill of what the other teams have been so far. But those other games, I mean, we talked coming into this year, even with a team like Jinga, who they themselves, Coach Satoru Matsushima was very, very much coming in low. Like, we are a newcomer, we are a challenger, and here they are at the top of the table right now. Granted, they have played more games, they don't have the best win percentage, and this game against Olay coming up is going to be huge for that, because Olay does have that. So if they're able to beat Olay and split the series with them, that's going to be huge for them. But a team like them, who they're a newcomer, they haven't been in the FCS before, and they very much were even themselves saying we're a challenger. And that was what Satoru was saying. Jake and I were on the phone with him today. He's like, we're challengers. Like, this is our attitude, is we are challengers in the league, even being at the top of the table right now. But a team like them, I mean, they've come and they've won 4 games. They've all, almost beat all the teams in the league. Now, granted, they have played most of those games at home, and everyone's traveling long distance to get them. And, we'll talk more about that on actual game day when we go live. And that's a big part of the story. But I mean, I think it's been really exciting to see these teams. It's been fun to, just last week, taking a production out to Grand Rapids and being in person there, rather than seeing it just on the screen and trying to do that. That's really cool. And I'm excited to have more opportunities like that, because there's something about just being there physically with the players and seeing the players and talking to the coaches and all that. So, but it's been, I think every game outside of the games that have been almost double digit losses, I think every game has been exciting and has probably had lead changes. I couldn't say that for sure, but it's been really fun, and I'm excited about it, and I think people watching are excited, and players are having a good time, and I think it's going well.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think too, from a behind the scenes perspective, I think that everybody's pulling on the rope in the same direction for the most part. We've run into some hiccups here and there, but I think we were very, very fortunate that we were able to figure out the team that works early, as far as the three of us and Gerard, and working with the teams. Some of our camera people that are traveling now, like Jacob, that they're in it for the right reasons, and everyone's excited. Truly passionate about the sport too. You think about I've, in the grand scheme of futsal, I am far from an experienced person, as weird as that says for what this channel is about, but I've only been following it closely since probably about 2019, so only about 4 or 5 years. But then you look at someone like a Gerard that has been following the sport for a few months prior to the season starting and fell in love with it. Those are the people that make this kind of stuff special, and kind of goes back to Tristan's question earlier about what makes it sustainable, and it's those people that are in it for the right reasons and love it and are passionate about it, and I can hear it in his voice, like when things happen. It's funny, this is probably the most I've looked at Jared and all this time we've been working together, because usually we're just
I've never seen Luke before today.
Yeah, this is so but I can hear. That's the cool thing, is like those other senses being heightened, and hearing Gerard's excitement, hearing Jared's excitement, feeling my own excitement. Is cool. And I think we got extremely fortunate that we were able to put such a quality team that works really well together from the get-go. It's so critical to this. Luke can tell horror stories on what happens when people aren't all pulling on the same rope in the same direction. And we've suffered through that together before, and this has just been light years difference. And I think that's what makes it successful, and allows us to make some next steps early too. When we talk about trying to sell that ad space as our next step, I fully did not expect to do that this year. I was hopeful we could, but I fully anticipated this is probably gonna be a next year project, and we gotta get this streaming thing right. Make sure some of these teams have never done it before. This is gonna be a learning experience for them. I'm hesitant to dive into all this at once. Make sure we've got it right, but we've got it right, which I think is really cool. And it's constantly improving every week. We've improved graphics. Jared's worked so hard on our graphics and our overlays, updating standings graphics and things. So that's a huge part of it. And then I just saw that Rudy's comment. Sorry, but
I don't have YouTube up, so I'm in the dark. I have no idea.
Oh yeah. Well, Rudy was just chiming in about never seeing Luke before, and just said true in all caps. So But yeah, and then on top of that, the teams have been great to work with. I think we've got a lot of really good culture in the league as well from these team owners, and we could definitely attest to that. But before we do, Rudy was asking about feeding commentators a steady view, wide angle cam, so they don't have to rely on unreliable camera work. Commentators on site, probably best option. And Luke, you can talk, and Jared can both talk about that. I mean, we've already made some pretty big steps in that direction, which I think is great.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Luke?
I was just gonna say, sometimes, it's a limitation of the internet. Putting 3 cameras up, pulling on the same bandwidth is a test of the bandwidth's capability. But I think we're working through some of these things. I think the best option, if we do have to be offsite, is just a reliable cam that follows the action. And everybody knows how this goes. Like everybody behind the scenes is that, volunteers, camera people. They're hard to come by because it's not like we're over here rolling in money, paying for good camera ops. It's just sometimes it's a girlfriend, sometimes it's a youth player. I think a wide angle cam as a feed to the commentators is a great idea. I think technically pulling it off, I see a few hurdles, but I mean, never say never. I think there's a lot of things we can do, but on site, we've talked about that at length, Jared and I. We feel like on site is going to be the best quality. And Jared and I are actually working on ways to collaborate with me off site and him being on site, working together, where we found software to where I can actually cut the show from Idaho while Jared's in Grand Rapids, Olay. And we have like this remote, I can control his computer through this remote thing we found. So there's really great. I mean,
might be testing that tonight. We'll see.
We might be testing that tonight. But I've always been like a super nerd for like, how can we figure this out? What technology, like what's the new thing? What can we try out? And that's where I came to video.ninja, which was this cool like tech nerd thing that we can figure out and use it for futsal.
Did you find it on Reddit? I feel like that's a Reddit find.
No, actually I found it on, I don't even remember where I found it now. I think funny. I found it in my YouTube feed.
Me, that just says Reddit. Like somebody somewhere was like, how can I do this? And someone's like, hey, there's this software called Video Ninja. Oh, sweet. And it's like golden. But, I mean, I would actually going back to like maybe a question or two before, Jake, you were talking about the people we have on the team. And I just had to say for a second that is absolutely one of the distinguishing factors of what we're doing with like specifically FCS Live is the people that are on this team are just amazing. Like, obviously you guys are awesome. I mean, when you talked about Jacob, the main camera guy, and Gerard, who's been coming on. My brother Joel has also been helping, and we've had some other people. But just like the talent and skill level of these people, really like raise what we can do, and are the reason why we can push to try to get to the limit and have our stream crash like 6 times in a game because we're like trying to see what we can do with our current stuff, and we're grabbing. I mean, there's just crazy stuff. We have this joke, me and Jacob, the camera guy, I have this joke that we have all these tripods around, but they're always missing like a piece. And it's like somehow, somewhere, and maybe Luke, you've had that happen before, but it's like this one's missing like the arm, and this one doesn't stand up straight, and this one doesn't have the little like thing that connects to the camera. And it's like, why do we have like 5 tripods and nothing works? And so, just going through that process. But people like Jacob, you wouldn't know in the stream. And actually, I don't even think I told you guys this, but last game, he was running the secondary camera and his tripod wasn't working well enough. He was literally like holding up his camera in some way and so steady, like his arms were getting so tired through the game. Like it was in a way that his arms were getting tired. And so he had to like take breaks, but he's like the kind of guy that figures it out and knows how to do that kind of thing. So I just had to say, like, that's one of the biggest assets of this team is the team and the people that are doing this. And then we were talking about what was the actual question? I went back. What was it? I forget.
What about feeding commentators steady view?
So
they don't have to rely on
going in person and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, I'm so hungry to go in person and like watch the game. And I know, like, actually doing remote streams at the beginning of the season was actually really, really cool. And I really enjoyed it. And obviously there were things about it that I didn't enjoy, because there's like some games where it's like, it's a black screen, or like, it's so like blurry. I can't see the names or the numbers. And so I feel like as a commentator, I can't do my job because I can't really see it. But like, it's really, really cool to be able to just sit here in the studio. I have this TV right here behind, the camera, and I can just like watch the game, and it's great. And I can call the game, but it's like, there's just a whole nother level when you're on site and like you can feel the environment and you can like talk and like see the players, and and we're trying to do interviews with players and interviews with coaches, and it's just 100% just another level. And we were talking, Luke, as well, like the difference between remote streaming, sending the camera feed to your computer and then up to YouTube, versus the camera going right to YouTube from the location is a big difference too. So I think there are things that we can figure out to make remote streams better, but I would much rather try to get to the point where we don't have to do them, because that is such a big step, and such a more valuable step. That's what I really want to do.
Yeah, I think it's the next viable step for anybody once they get through this part. And Luke, we've talked about that quite a bit, that, the remote is what gets you to the show. This is what gets the whole thing started with limited help and those few passionate people that are in it to make it grow. And then what's really exciting for me is I feel like we're at that next step of, okay, now we've got a big crew of people that are actually excited about what we're doing and bought in. And now we can take that next big step and get that TV truck. So I think it's
TV truck fusion, TV truck fusion. Yeah, it's a close call. It's a close call.
We'll get there. These are the things you need to start taking pictures of on the road, Jared, so we could do like an album of how it evolved in a few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about, maybe now's a good time to talk about the teams too. And I want to start by saying a big part of this production success has been the team managers, the coaches, the team owners. Jared and I are calling them weeks of game days and spending time with them on the phone to tell their story, and doing interviews. And I think it's been really fun to see how mentalities have changed, especially now at the halfway point, where we're just beyond the halfway point now of the season, and seeing how these teams have evolved and seeing who's been surprises and who's not. And I think I would be remiss not to shout out Satoru again,
right?
Jenga, because number one, the results so far have been a real big surprise for me. I remember the old NFPL days was a much different squad, but this style of play is way more entertaining to me. It's been fun to watch, and Satoru and his team culture is just so positive. It's hard not to be a fan. And, like Jared alluded to earlier, talking about some of these conversations we've had and we're the challengers, but yet they find themselves at the top of the table. And those conversations of we need to work on things have evolved into, we are confident. We're starting to feel that confidence come through. And then talking to someone like Gio at Midwest tonight before we went live and talking to him about his game coming up against Lansing. And he was saying how, the guys are starting to feel good. Like we're at a point in the season where they're having fun and, we're laughing and joking, and which we didn't do before. It was all business. And I think that says a lot. And I've been really thankful that they've spent that time to give us that insight and allow us to kind of shine a light on their team culture, which I think is important. And I think that the teams that are at their places in the table make sense based on some of those stories we've heard in the background. Don't you think?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
I think we've talked about it before, Jake, ad nauseum on this stream. Super impressed with what Jenga's doing. Super impressed with the program. They deserve to be at the top. Although I tapped Ole to be the victor on this weekend, I don't think it's going to be an easy game for Ole. Do they have a chance of losing this game? Yeah, 100%. I've watched Ole lose. I watched Ole take Trizub lightly, and they lost to him. Not to say that they didn't put up a good fight, but I mean, it's well within the bounds that they could lose a game. But I kind of want to shout out Lansing City right now, because I feel like Lansing City's position on the table is kind of deceiving. I think it's kind of deceiving. I think you see them down there in fifth, like just above Midwest, and I'm like, they're not that team. They just aren't. And I think, I honestly feel like the tables are going to turn tonight. I feel like, Midwest is on a run. They're feeling good, but I think Lansing City has an axe to grind. I don't think they like being there, and I think they're going to come into this game, and I think they're going to have some strong feelings about what this game is going to do. I think they're going to have something to say at every single ball, every single 50-50 ball. I think Lansing is going to make life miserable for Midwest in Grand Rapids this weekend.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and I definitely have Lansing City bias for sure. I mean, you guys, if you were at the beginning of the show, like I played for Lansing City, like all my work up until this year has been like a part of Lansing City. Like even the USL streams, it was a Lansing City stream. So like, and obviously my brother plays for them and owns the club. So it's like I have a huge, like, my heart is with Lansing City for sure. But like I totally see what you're saying. I mean, if you go back to the games, the games that they lost. So they lost to Jinga at Jinga, and the shot differential was like Jinga's had like 5 shots or 6 shots and scored like 3 goals on those, and Lansing City had like 35. And so that stat alone tells you a lot about that kind of game. And then their next game, I think they played their game after that, I think it was Midwest, and obviously they cleaned house there. But then, Midwest United at home, their first home game, they go down 6 goals in the first 10 minutes, and it's like, obviously that's a huge deficit. And then they come back and they only lose by 2. And in one of the streams also at the end of it, we were talking that they haven't had a full squad yet this year, really, for like one game. They've had some players missing it. And I think every team probably is dealing with this to some extent. Even Satoru was talking today about his team in Jinga, that, the challenge of traveling, how much they're traveling, and can be hard to get as many players rostered. And I think that's something that we're going to see as Jinga travels to other teams. How much were those teams impacted by that? Because we saw Imperial with a very light squad when they went to Jinga. Even Lansing's squad was thin. So most teams have been thin going there. But I definitely agree. I think Lansing City is in, like, they are not out of it by any means. I think they still control their future because they haven't played anybody twice yet, and they haven't played Detroit Imperial at all. And so I think they can definitely go out and show. And obviously they have to get wins if they want to make it happen. But their record and what their points are definitely deceiving. If you weren't watching the games or seeing the stats or things like that, you definitely would miss that for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at their game results now. I have them up on the screen for the viewers, and they haven't lost a game by any more than 2 goals in those 3 losses. 2-4 in the Jenga match, 12-10 in that 22-goal thriller.
That was the match with the goal of the year, wasn't it? Or was that versus Midwest?
Midwest. That Midwest was the one where Luciano Cernuda, he had the kind of turnaround, like scissor bike type of deal. But Midwest was the one where there was the one-time chip off the corner that Jeremy had, which was
that was
also
a laser
insane.
Too. That was a laser too.
So Lansing, the arena has been a source of tons of amazing goals, because Davide Poche also had one that was I don't know if you guys remember it. No, it was because it was when they played Midwest, and there was the first Grand Rapids game that you guys were doing. So you guys didn't see it, but he flicked it over somebody, and it was just a great show of skill. But the arena has produced amazing goals so far. So
yes,
it's an amazing place. It's it's rightfully so. Well, and
Yeah,
then it kind of ties into what Luke said too, is Lansing goes to Grand Rapids with a very young squad, light, like you said, and they only lose by 1 to former NFPL champs. I think that says a lot about.
And I do have to say, there was a goal that we didn't see because it didn't happen on stream, but it was mishandled by the keeper, and it was just a given goal, right, in that game. So even if you just take that out, that's tied. You know what I mean? And
right,
so it's crazy.
Well, and then you got an interesting dynamic at Lansing too, because you have your brother who has arguably one of the most exciting resumes for futsal in the United States, and then a very young nucleus around him, which I think is really interesting. And watching the young guys evolve over the course of the last 4 games has been really, really cool. I don't think those young guys facing Olay in November would be the same as what we saw from them last month. And I that's the part that excites me, is watching the teams evolve and grow. And then we've talked to Conrad before at Lansing about how it's kind of interesting. You got these young guys with a lot of futsal experience, and then the older guys on the team don't quite have that same resume, but they of course bring life experience. So you have the futsal experience and the life experience kind of blending together and making a really, really cool storyline for Lansing that could evolve into something. And I kind of see them as a dark horse that could steal away a 4th place spot and get in that semifinals match, even though they're 1-3 right now. Definitely someone to look out for, which is cool.
We have a comment from Ben Rudy in the chat. Jeremy's thigh is the same size as my midriff.
They
That's
are
so
famous.
funny. Yes, this is true.
I'm gonna jump in with one more comment on Lansing. Is that
Yeah.
speaking about the young players, watching Lansing play, I watched like I think 3 to 4 goals, and I think it was the game versus Midwest, but you could see where the players were in the way they were attacking the goal. It wasn't like they didn't understand where to be. They were all in all the right places. It's just like it's that moment of putting the ball away. It's that experience of finishing. It's that experience of not snatching at the shot and having the presence to take a touch, put the ball in the net. You could see that they just need that time in front of net. So I'm excited with a lot of the young players because, I mean, they're doing all the right things. They just need more opportunities, more reps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I even think about like Robeson, you know, he's been really close on several shot opportunities. And I feel he's one of those guys that's, you know, looking for the futsal experience compared to the, you know, the life experience. And I think once he gets just another game or two under his belt, I feel like we're going to see just a flyer game from him where he just, you know, lights off like a rocket and has a bunch of goals, exciting goals, because he's been so close so many times.
Yeah.
He's giving me anxiety. I want it for him so bad. I'm like, oh man, he's been so close so many times. Just get in there. Like I'm like trying to will the ball in for him. It's just... Well, we've talked a little bit about Olay already, but just kind of working our way up the table. You know, Grand Rapids has played the least amount of games, but they're undefeated. And they're looking for a new challenge and joined FCS this year from NFPL, which is I think really exciting. It creates a really interesting storyline that you have in a roundabout way 2 defending champs floating around in this season. And Olay just is so they're just so well known across the country, and so many people see them as a pillar of the futsal world in the United States, and they've been really a huge joy to watch. You know, Jared, you're going there to watch them live this week. What do you think? What are you excited about?
Yeah, well, I think this is a really big game for them. They started the season really well. They don't have any losses yet. They have the highest win percentage right now, so they are in the best place, even though they're not in the top of the board. You know, they are, you know, for what it's worth, they're number one right now on the table, and I think it's an important game because they're like, are they going to continue that, or are they going to start dropping certain games? And it's like, if you can build a resume, right, you know, 3 wins, 4 wins, or another tie, and you're, you know, 5 or 6 games in, you still haven't lost. Like this is kind of a big deal in my eyes. So I think this is a big game for them. You know, Jinga gave them a really good match in Jinga. I mean, there was like, I think the lead changed like 2 or 3 times. Olay was up, Jinga came back, took the lead, and Olay came back and ended up winning. And obviously that was one of the games that Jinga played on their smaller court, which is, it's really hard when you're playing on a court that small. I mean, I've played on courts that small when we were with Lansing City too. And I mean, it's almost not futsal when you get to it, like at certain points. It's like, so you can kind of take that for what it's worth as far as that goes. But I think it's going to be a big game for them to see. They're going to be without Lito Esquivel, one of their, you know, leaders on the team and one of their top players. So I'm excited to see what that's like. And on top of that, I have not experienced their fan base in person. And, you know, we've seen their fan base show up, not only watching the live stream, but also in person. We've heard them over the live stream. So I'm excited to be in that environment and see what kind of, you know, that feels like and the energy that they bring.
As someone who's been to their games, I can tell you it's electric. It's going to be fun.
That's awesome.
It's going to be really fun. I've seen them at their old facility, The Spot. Spent some time with Rudy there, who's in the chat. That's where I met Rudy for the first time in person, and you know, he's a commentary legend for Olay.
Very much so.
Yeah, and then I have not been to their current facility, homeschool building, but I've been to 2 at the old place, and the fans. First time as a spectator, second time I helped Rudy, and won, and both sides of that were so cool. their fans travel well is also, which I really like. They are not afraid to make a trip to Ann Arbor. They're not afraid to make a trip to Detroit. I've seen them show up with, 10, 15 fans all the way in Columbus. I mean, they pack up the car and they go. So I think that's really cool. And the team just has such an interesting dynamic of veterans like Lito, like Johan, that have coached some of the younger guys in the squad that are now coming up, like Cesar and some of the other guys, Frankie. So it's really interesting that dynamic there, and how they've built a true culture there that takes a lot of time to get to that point. And I think some of Fabian's coaching style is shown in his culture with that patience of cultivating something and sticking to the plan and letting something grow and develop without panicking or making rash decisions. That's how he coaches the team on the court, and that's how he's built a really great club. So they're exciting to watch this new Jenga side for this year. Real big challenge for them this week, but I think like Luke said, it's going to be an exciting match, and I think that I just can't wait. I'm really, really excited to see more of Olay. This is kind of where it all started for me. So,
right.
And like Luke said, with us and our involvement in this kind of stuff. So, it's going to be cool. And Olay's got a busy February. They got their rivalry rematch next week. I think they have Detroit at some point soon too, Detroit Imperial. So, it's going to be a good time to be watching those streams. It's going to be really exciting matches. So that's going to be cool.
Yeah,
Speaking of,
sure.
what do you think about Imperial? A little surprised to see them with 2 losses in the last 2 games.
So before we talk about Imperial, I have to say, so I used to play basketball at the homeschool building.
Oh, did you
so
really?
I've been there. Yeah. So I grew up playing on a homeschool basketball team, and we played there. And for some reason, I shot really good on that court. I hated the court because it was a sport court for basketball, which I didn't like, and there was like dead spots. But for some reason, I shot really good on that court. But anyways, and then also you said one of the players for Olay, Johan Vasquez, is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's Johan, not Johan.
I think it's Johan. I might be wrong.
Because
Rudy.
Oh my goodness, the amount of like
myself.
There's like names that I have to like guess. Like, do I like which way? Like, we don't get any of that information. In case you weren't wondering, we don't get any information about how names are pronounced.
Yeah,
and we just go for it. So
we're corrected live on air.
Yes, corrected.
Yes.
Live on air. Luke goes in my ear and says, "Hey, this is how you say that guy's name." And I'm like, "Oh, nice. This is great." But that's all right. So anyways, we were talking about Detroit Imperial. Okay, so Detroit Imperial, so their last game is, I almost feel like you can't count their last game. They didn't have any of their players that are like we normally see. No Davide, no Omar, no Michael Forbes, and there's other players that I'm missing there too. But like their whole starting lineup, I think was, and in their whole roster, there was just multiple players that are the core of that team that were not there. So that's like in terms of comparison, it's like I don't know if we're going to see that continuing. It sounds like there's a reason that happened. I don't know everything, like the timeline of what they're going through right now, but that last game they did not have their normal team. The other game they lost in Jenga, they also did not have their normal team. I mean, they had more of their normal team, but I think they had 5 court players. Was that right? 5 and a goalie. Was that all that they brought? I think they only had like 6 or 7 that ended up showing up.
I think
to
they
Cincinnati.
might have had 7. Yeah.
7.
Yeah.
So obviously that's like a big difference. And then they had the home game against Jenga and then 2 games against Midwest. So it's like, what do we actually have to evaluate on right now? Like, we don't really have like consistent, like the first game against Jenga is probably like the best one that we have to like really evaluate. So we'll just have to me, Imperial is like, obviously they're the defending FCS champs. They are in that last year. And this year they're still a question mark for me. I don't know what they're going to be like. Are they going to have their, how long are their starters not going to be around? Like, we've gotten some information. There's things that we can't share, and we don't know exactly what that looks like, so it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think they've officially made their announcement.
Did they? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So they were invited to a tournament down in Costa Rica. So they'll be playing down against some very, very big clubs with the likes of like Boca Juniors, Independiente from Argentina. So they've got a pretty good opportunity to play against some of the best talent in our side of the globe down in Costa Rica. So they're preparing for that. I believe that starts the 20th, if I remember right. I'm trying to look at
January 20th.
January 20th. Yeah. So
Okay.
their guys were kind of resting and preparing for that ahead of time, and they sent the reserves. And then I believe their next match as well, we'll see a similar story if I remember right. They have Lansing on the 25th at the arena.
Yeah, that's not one that you want to miss your best players for.
No.
Yeah. So that's gonna completely change the dynamic of that. And I know from talking to Pierce that they thought that they would probably be missing a lot of starters for that, because if this tournament goes well, they'll still be in Costa Rica at that time. So
okay,
I would.
That's really cool, by the way. That's awesome that they
Yeah.
have a chance to compete at that level. That's really cool.
I think it's great. I don't know the exact details of who's running the tournament specifically. I've seen some conflicting reports on what that actually is, but regardless, huge opportunity for Detroit and a great honor to be invited. So I give them a ton of credit for that. So I'm curious to see how that goes for them. And as we get streaming information on that, we'll share it with you guys and hopefully be able to, depending on the timing of those games, maybe we can do some watch parties and watch along with our Detroit team here on the channel. So that could be fun. But yeah, you look at that Midwest match being reserves, you look at the loss to Jenga, and them only having 5 players for that. I mean, they had just enough guys on that trip due to some last minute things coming up for them. So it's just like you said, Jared. I think it's hard to gauge where they're really at right now. But they've got a very difficult latter half of the season coming. Those 2 matches with Lansing, 2 matches with Olay, another match ahead with Midwest. So the battle to retain the title is going to be exciting for sure.
So here's a hot take on Imperial specifically. So yes, Imperial can play futsal. We've seen it. They know what they're doing. They can handle themselves on the court. They're in the upper part of the table. Yeah, they've had some ups and downs with personnel, travel, all this stuff. But here's my main question. I know we've talked about this before. As futsal and in sports in general is an entertainment-based affair, what are your guys' thoughts on what I call the Detroit Bad Boys and kind of some of the antics they bring to the court? You all know what I'm talking about. I love them.
What do you mean?
I love what they bring to the court. Where is it too far? Where is it too much? Do you feel like it helps the league? Do you think it feel like it helps futsal? I love it. I can't get enough of it. All I do is think back to the Pistons, where they had Bill Lambier, Isaiah Thomas, all the heads that were they wanted to fight everybody, and it was entertaining to watch. So that I'll let you guys run with that.
Jared, you start.
No, you.
Okay. All right, fine. So, well, I want to give Detroit credit because, we, like Luke said, we've seen a lot of that in years past, and it got them into trouble, and they know that. Like, that's when you talk to them, that's part of it. Is we know that it's a double-edged sword to play this way and to have passion kind of at this level that they show, that there's going to be repercussions when it gets out of hand. And they saw how that impacted them from the perspective of their NFPL run last year, where they ran into suspensions and they were missing key players for important parts of the season. So I want to give them a ton of credit, because one of the things that Coach Pierce has done over there, and I think he's a big part of this, is they found a way to kind of harness that. They've not lost their identity, but they've dialed it back enough that it doesn't get them in so much trouble as it used to. So I think the last 4 or 5 games. Now, again, I think that a big part of that as well, Jared has highlighted, is they haven't. It's hard to say what we're looking at, because we've seen a reserves team, we've seen a shorthanded team, and we've seen a couple of blowouts. But I think back to that opening match against Jenga, and tempers did flare at a point. But I think they've done a good job of bringing that in. I'm curious to see how that continues with these harder matches that are ahead, where they will be more passionate, they will be more physical on both sides of the ball, and people know, all these teams are now familiar with them, and they know how the game is going to go, and that there's going to be that passion and that physicality. Um, we saw a little bit of it in that last match, actually. Now that I think about it, didn't we, against Midwest, where there was a minor flare up, but it stopped immediately. It was harnessed right away, and that's what I like. I like the mentality of the team. I like the bad boy. I think it makes kind of a really unique storyline, and I think it's what makes those guys special. But the key is making sure it's not detrimental to what you guys are trying to accomplish, and I think the last few games they've done that.
So you want to know my thoughts, actually?
Yes, go for it.
Right? How would I say? So there are some very talented players on that team, for sure. I actually have been not as connected with FCS probably the last 2 years. So I haven't, the time when they split off from Midwest, I wasn't around as much. And so I'm kind of jumping back in and recatching some of the last year or two and that kind of thing. But it's I have to say that if I was coaching a team or if I was on a team, this is not the culture that I would want to be a part of. It's just not. I understand that, there's an entertainment value that can happen with that. But to me, growing up playing sports, if I had teammates that were, getting into fights or not getting into fights, but wanted to have this, we've seen this physicality go overboard in games. And we've seen that. And I've actually even played against it sometimes. And if I'm on a team and I have a teammate who's doing that, I'm like, dude, what the heck are you doing? This is not who we're about. And this is the culture they have. And so if they're leaning into that, that's, I don't have a say in that. But my thoughts on it is this is not how I would choose to play. This is not how I would choose to have a culture of a team. I don't think that it is. I don't think it's good for everyone involved. I don't think it's actually healthy to have. I mean, I don't think it's healthy to have this attitude in outlook that's that's pushing the bar on maybe getting into a fist fight, and that kind of sounds maybe extreme, but we saw this in the last game. We saw someone come up wanting to look like they were going to throw hands, and it's this is not what I believe the sport of futsal is about. And I don't believe that the FCS wants to I don't believe that's the kind of culture that the FCS wants their teams to have. And obviously I'm not, I don't make those decisions, but that's just my take and my outlook. And I don't want to talk negative or to bash them or anything. It's just this is not how I would want to play or how I would want to have a team or the culture. It's not it.
I think too, it's interesting their group of guys, some of their backstory and their personal lives is kind of what feeds it too. And I wonder if it almost just feels natural at that point for what they do. And I agree with you, Jared, that I don't think that it's something that I don't think it's a culture I would do well in personally. I see how it's working for them though. But you absolutely have to find a way to control it, because otherwise it will eat you alive. And, going back to one of the early questions in the stream about, sustainability, I think that that's a risk to your sustainability when you gamble with that a little bit. So if they're aware of it and they're managing it, then I think there's hope for them. But, it is something that could be dangerous in a number of ways. So it's a curious thing. But it seems like kind of like what Luke said with the reference to the Detroit Bad Boys of the Pistons and stuff. It kind of feels like that. And actually, I just saw Rudy mention it too, that Detroit versus everybody mentality. And there's down here we say Ohio against the world. It's kind of the same thing. It might be a Midwest thing, I don't know, but with sports. But Yeah, it's interesting that that they've kind of taken that on and kind of revived that old school 90s mentality of what used to go on in the palace. So yeah, I'm curious to see how it evolves and what it does for them and how it impacts their season too. Because like I said, this could be something that could end up being detrimental in what they're already looking at 2 losses, which there's still a lot of season to go, but 2 losses out of 10 games trying to defend against the likes of a very successful Jenga side so far, and Olay creeping around in the background. Midwest already getting revenge on you once, looking for it again. And they're definitely going to want to be full strength as much as possible, and that's going to require a little bit of discipline along the way. But speaking of Midwest, formerly Migos, someone that's seen championships before in the series, uh, what do you think about their performance so far this season? Start with Jared.
Start with me. So Midwest, I think it seems like they consistently roster the most players. I feel like on game day, like their list of available players is like seems to be the longest. And that could be totally wrong. Maybe Olay is it longer, but I feel like they consistently have like lots of players. They usually have multiple keepers that they're playing, so they seem like they kind of go kind of deep. And they did travel to Jenga and lose that game, so they've kind of got their long game out of the way. I didn't get a chance to watch them play against Olay, which was kind of a bummer. And watching them play at Lansing was obviously that was a very interesting game because they went up so quickly, and a lot of those goals were a lot of them were given away by Lansing in that for those first 6 goals. So I feel like I don't really know who they are yet. And I don't know if you guys feel that way either. Like a team like we were just talking about Detroit Imperial, it's like we kind of have a question mark of like where are they at right now and what's going to continue. But I feel like for Midwest, it's like I'm not sure what their identity is as a team. I haven't really picked up on that yet. And maybe that's just I just haven't seen it. When we went there to stream this past game, I mean, like commentating the game wasn't exactly my first thing that I was focused on. So like I wasn't really soaking in all that information because we're just trying to get it up and running. But like I kind of feel like I don't really know what the identity of this team is yet. And I don't know how you guys feel, if it's the same or not.
It's funny, Jared, because I'm going to echo you exactly. As I think I have a little more insight following Grand Rapids Olay. So follow me now. Gio used to play for Grand Rapids Olay and is now the head coach for Midwest. What I see from them is pretty much the same thing you see, is a team that's not bad. They're very good. And you can see Gio with a really heavy hitter set of tools that he was given to by Fabian. Fabian just gave him the keys to the kingdom. But I see what you see, which is a team that's trying to find their identity. I think Gio is a young coach. I think Gio has a killer lineup. I think he's got some really great players. I think right now, Gio needs to say, thank you, Fabian, but this is how I'm going to do things. I think he needs to find his own way. I think he needs to find his own path. I think when he does, I think Fabian might want to watch his back a little bit, because I think Gio's going to be a good coach. And I think that's where it stems from, is the identity of that team. So goes the coach, so goes the team. I think when Gio kind of gets a little bit of that experience under his belt, maybe gets a couple tournaments, travels a little bit with these teams, gets some seasoned players, maybe cycles in a few kids that he's tutored from all the way up from grassroots, I think you might see a very, very heavy contender for one of the better coaches in the United States.
It's interesting, the whole dynamic with that. But I think that if I had to think about Midwest and their identity up to this point, I would say, now I was fortunate. I got to watch the Olay Midwest match while you guys were covering the opposite stream. And between that and the Lansing match and even the Imperial match a little bit, I would say the biggest thing about them is that they kind of have this never say die attitude. You know, when they were facing Olay, they were down by 3 goals and came back, and then they were down by 2 goals, I believe, and came back and ultimately tied. They just could not be knocked out of that match, and I think that's a testament to the players and their quality, and to Gio, and maybe some of that has been learned from that patience and sticking to the plan, and making those minor tweaks to move along, like we see from their rivals. But I think that what's interesting about the Grand Rapids scene as a whole that makes this question maybe difficult for us to answer is that the culture for futsal in Grand Rapids is so strong. All these guys know each other so incredibly well and have played together in some form or fashion, or played against each other in some form of fashion. There's no strangers between those two teams. I think you're going to see a lot of consistencies just by the nature of the market. Not even so much, the person behind a lot of it, but all these guys just being so familiar with each other. So I think another thing too is, Midwest it's year 2 under this name, I believe, but they're dealing with a bit of a culture change internally with Midwest United being, now kind of the flagship of the whole thing and not Migos. And so maybe I'm only speculating, but maybe that's part of the reason we see that kind of confusion to a viewer of, okay, who are these guys really? Or maybe for us that are having a hard time putting our finger on the pulse. But one of the things I really like as well about Midwest is they have that depth that we talked about, and they have strong lines. So you see that starting lineup, you see a second line all come out, a third line all come out, and they all work together very well. It's hard to pick out a weak line when they play with their full 14-team squad, so 14-person squad. So I think it's going to be interesting, and I think that we're going to, now that they're in front of a camera this year and they're doing it on stream in front of everybody, maybe we learn what that culture really is in front of the camera, and maybe they're figuring that out too. So it's going to be interesting. But I like what Gio is doing, and first year coach, like you mentioned, Luke. So that's a big part of it, and figuring it out along the way. And I've had some great conversations with Gio where he's talked about that. And look, I need to focus on the coaching bit and what we're going to do, and make sure the guys hear my message. And not to take away from some of our notes for this weekend, but one of the things that stuck out to me with my conversation with Gio today was how he said, how focused the guys are. You look at where they're at right now. They had Detroit last week. Now they've got Lansing this week. And then next week they have Olay. And so 3 really big games. As a player, it could be very easy to kind of look ahead to a game, or to maybe because of some old games or old beef, like you've got someone marked on the calendar, but Gio has really praised his guys on the fact that they've stayed focused game to game to game, and let him worry about the scope of the whole season. So I think that's interesting too. I think he's been brought some stability to the team in a way. So I think that's interesting. Interesting take for them at least. What about looking into this weekend too? Speaking of Jenga, what do you guys think about Jenga? We've talked about him quite a bit already, but I think their results so far this year have been pretty surprising with how dominant they were at home. And now the challenge of going ahead with the rest of the season. What do you guys think so far?
What do you think, Luke?
I've said quite a bit about Jenga on the stream. I think that it is a big factor of how do they travel. I think as not being an athlete, this is only hearsay because I haven't done this, but I do hear a lot of stories of travel is interesting. It seems like a little thing. It seems like, oh, you just go to a different building and play. But I've heard that, it takes a specific mindset for an athlete to travel to another place and play and put in a performance and go home. That's a question mark. I think that's a really big question mark. From what I've seen from Jenga, as far as talent on the team, I've said this to Jake. I see a lot of really raw, really good talent, and I'll bring up. Oh man, his name escaped me. Help me with his name, Jake.
Dima Sherbina. I already know.
Dima Sherbina.
Dima Sherbina.
Dima Sherbina. Like, I don't know. I think I stand alone in my opinion on this guy, but I just see, you know, maybe it's the twinkle in his eye, maybe it's just the way he moves. I don't know. I see big things for him. If he sticks with futsal, I could see him learning game after game, practice after practice. It seems to me when he gets on the ball, it's like an understanding. It looks like an understanding of where to be, where to go, how to do it. It's those natural athletes. It's like my friend in high school who would hit a grand slam home run. You give him a high five and you're like, dude, you just hit a grand slam. You won the game. He's like, that's what I do. I just feel like that from him. He's just like the athlete. He's the guy. But we'll see. We'll see. Like all the Satoru and the Tommy, those are really exciting aspects as well. Bringing some really heavy hitters from the Japan League. Really exciting stuff going on. It's kind of interesting to me because you felt like back in the TJ Manning days and back when I just lost his name again. Eric Haggerty were there. You felt like these are the guys. These are their players. And then when they left, you're like, man, they got gutted. But just the opposite has been true this year. And they really stepped up. They're better than they've ever been. And way better than any NFPL iteration of Jenga. They got to get rid of that small court, though. That's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All small.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you covered a lot of the good points there. I mean, and you threw in the small court thing, which is a big deal. And I think the only thing I would add is an additional element of the test of travel for these specific teams in this league is the development of the league is not at the point yet where you know what players are traveling. Every time a team has traveled to Jenga, particularly because it's a long one for everyone else, we don't know who shows up. That's been the story. And that's just where the league is right now, right? That's just where the commitment level of players are at right now is being, you don't know. And talking to Satoru earlier today, that's going to be one of their biggest challenges when they're on the road for the rest of the season is what is their personnel going to look like? There's some players that I think there was one guy, Jake, I think it was Giuliani Campos, right? He was like, this guy is like so committed and like he's going to be there. And it sounds like he's the type of player that he's going to show up to every single game. But some of these, I'm sure all the players have, full-time jobs and full-time families and full-time, and so Jenga's in the hardest spot when it comes to travel because they are making this huge trip so often. And all the other teams, when they came into Jenga, it was like, who are they going to bring today? Oh, Detroit Imperial has, 5 and 2 goalies. All right. Sounds good. Lansing City has, 3 subs and a goalie. Okay. Yeah. And so this is going to be a huge part of what, their challenge traveling, not only what you mentioned, Luke, as far as, just the dynamics of a player going on the road and all that, but also just who are they going to be able to bring and what are they going to do with those players?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I know just from chatting with Satoru, even prior to the season starting and his, his game plan for the season, they've rostered on their league roster quite a bit more players than anybody else in the league. Of course, you're capped at that 14 players for game day, but he knows that the travel is going to be tough. And I think he knows that, look, I'm the one that's out of market compared to everybody else in this league, and I need to prepare for it. So I think he's done a good job of that. I think the thing I'm the biggest fan of is how their culture has evolved. I think that their leader in Satoru is someone who is constantly willing to learn, and he's a sponge, and he's doing things to improve himself and to improve his coaching styles. And he takes learning and coaching and criticism very well. I've been fortunate enough to see him interact with Dushan and get tips from him. And, I think sometimes we get to a point in our lives where we think we've got it pretty well figured out. It's hard to take that hard advice, but he's done an extremely nice job of it. He's called on old friends that he knows will make him better, like in Tommy, Kazuki Tamasawa coming over from Machida to help him coach and also to play and participate. And he said today, even right, Jared, how that's even created more opportunities for touches for the players. Just the fact that Tommy is here,
Yeah.
because he's running his own sessions with the guys when Satoru can't. And
Yeah, I have to just chime in real quick. I think that's such an exciting thing that he's coming over. That I mean, even I don't feel like I truly understand what the caliber of league that he's a part of and the caliber of league that Satoru had been a part of, and that we have these players playing here. Like, I just think it's an amazing thing that deserves more recognition and honor.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that we have someone from the F League in our midst, I think is massive. And Tommy is someone with a ton of experience, and it shows. And some of the things we heard from Satoru and some of that, change in style from Japan to the United States that they've experienced, I think is really, really exciting and fun to talk about. And it's just one more layer to this whole Jenga story that I think is so special. And I'm looking forward to seeing how their road trip goes. They got a tough road ahead. And I believe that's going to make a huge deal. Kensuke Nakai came over too. Ben, yeah, I think you're right. Didn't he play with them? He was the guy that was big on social media with them as well, right? Do you remember that from the NFPL days, Luke?
I do not. I do not know what we're talking about.
I forgot about that. That's a good shout, Rudy.
Wait, did he come over? He came over in NFPL days, you said?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So this would have been 2 years ago. It was their last season in NFPL, and they actually made a bit of a run, and almost made the playoffs with him.
I think I remember this a little bit now.
He was very, very talented, very good. Yeah. So that influence and that network in Japan is really something that makes Jenga really exciting. And as a team from almost Ohio, I think that it's kind of an unusual spot for them to tell this story too, which is kind of cool. Which is awesome.
We can bring up a previous comment that Cincinnati is Kentucky.
That's right. That's what I was alluding to. But yes. But yeah, they've got a very tough road. They're in a good position in first place, but now they got to find a way to defend it, and it's all going to be, on the streets traveling up to Michigan. So I'm curious to see how they fend everybody off. They've split the series with Detroit Imperial, but they still have to face everyone else. So I'm really excited to see how this evolves. I don't know about you guys, but not only because they're technically an Ohio team, but because I'm really excited. This is surpassing my expectations of what I expected from a team new to the league.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting to see. It kind of seems like that's like where we're at in the season right now. Is like, what do you think about these guys? Oh, we'll see about these guys. Like, they got a couple of good games coming up. Like, what do you think about these guys? Oh, dude, we'll see about those guys because they got these games coming up, and that's just where we're at right now. It's the middle of the season, and you really only have one team that would be very hard pressed to make it into the playoffs, and so that makes it a very much of a we'll see kind of a season, time in the season right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that halfway point. It's that time of the year in any season for any sport where you start to hate the commentators and the sports analysts because all they can do is speculate. Like, that's all there is to do. Like, it's close enough that we can start to get excited and the league table starting to take shape, but it's not close enough that anything is leading anywhere just yet. Yeah. And it's like, oh man. And this weekend's a perfect example. With the right results, this table could completely change and this video will be obsolete. Right. So like it's
right. And there's about this game this weekend. Oh, we got a big game coming up this weekend. Yeah, and they're playing in a big game this weekend. Man. Every game is a big game right now.
That's right. That's right. That's going to be the theme of January, I think.
Big game January.
Big games in January.
Big games.
So yeah, we've got looking at this table and those next challenges is Jenga is going to travel to Olay, like we said, and that's going to be a huge rematch, and then Lansing going to Midwest. So I want to just encourage everyone that's in the stream right now or who's listening back to this on the VOD to tune into FCS live and tune into the YouTube channel for FCS at Futsal Champions Series FCS on YouTube. And make sure you catch these games because, of course, this crew with me here is extremely biased, but we think we got something really special going on in the Midwest and would love to share it with you. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of us growing the sport and getting the word out. So, hopefully everyone can join us. As we looked at that second half, Jared, what What are you anticipating like the whole way around as far as what's next for the league?
The second half of the season.
Yeah, just in general.
So, in general, we're gonna find out what Jenga's made of because they're traveling now. We're gonna find out. Let's see. We're gonna see if we can discover more about the identity of the Midwest team and who they are. You know, obviously they're putting goals away, they're winning games, but the identity of their team and that kind of uniqueness, like emerging. I think we'll see that. I think we're gonna see what Imperial is all about this year and what they, you know, how many games are they going to have players missing for this opportunity? That's wonderful for them, but that's obviously going to impact them. So what's that going to look like? You know, and then the young players of Lansing City, this is like they have to turn it on and start winning games. And they've been very close, but you know you can't be very close in all your games and come up short and make the playoffs. You just can't. So I think that's also, you know, we're gonna see that. You know, obviously I've talked about my heart being for Lansing City, you know, on this before, but I'm very excited to watch them play, to kind of see their team kind of come together and when they're not missing players, and also their younger guys getting experience, because their team looks like the most futsal team they've really ever had. They have players now that have been in the academy for years, and the game of futsal is second nature to them. They don't have to think about receiving the ball with the sole of their foot. They don't have to think about where to be positionally on the court. And so, you know, I'm very excited to watch them play. But, you know, on a higher level as well, we are going to see, and we have already started to see it, we're seeing the junk rise to the surface. We are seeing things are getting exposed in the league this year, right? With all the people that are involved, because the standard is going up. The standard is being raised, and now that standard is going up, any issues are being exposed, and so we're going to find out ultimately after this year, and as the FCS goes on, what teams have what it takes to continue to be a part of it. What players have what it takes to continue to be a part of it. You know, from kind of all standpoints. That's something that I think is, from a league perspective, that I've noticed is, you know, we're gonna all that stuff is getting exposed, whether you like it or not. This is it, and so you're gonna have to decide. You know, and that, I mean, honestly, I think this is also true for what we're doing, because we're trying to raise what we're doing. And so, you know, last game, you know, our stream crashed 6 times. Like, we got exposed 6 times, right? And, you know, I heard my wife was actually at home watching the game, and she was like, if you wouldn't have said anything, I wouldn't have even known it crashed. I would have thought it was my Wi-Fi because it was just a spinning circle. I was like, oh, dang it. I should have just been like, you know, kept going like nothing ever happened. Yeah. But, you know, because we're trying to raise the bar on many levels, like things that are an issue are being exposed, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a really, really good thing. It's just, what do you do with it, right? When we have the issues that we have in our team and what we're doing, like what we produce and some of the problems that we had in the last stream, do we just go, oh, okay, well, this is just how it's going to be, or are we going to try to find ways to figure it out and to take another step? And I think the teams and the players are going to have the same opportunity, right? Here, you know, here's exposed. We've had teams that are late to games. We've had teams that, you know, something as simple as getting rosters and roster numbers to us. And I definitely feel strongly about this, because as a commentator, I'm like, I need to know what the number is of this player, because I can't say anything. But like those kinds of things, they're being exposed, and we're going to find out, you know, who is in to take on those challenges and to grow and to take responsibility. We talked about early in this chat about sustainability for a league, and I think probably the number one thing, I think of 2 things. I think, you know, responsibility and the dismissing of egos. I think those are the 2 things, right? The dismissing of what I deserve, what I get, and, you know, and we've commonly talked about that as ego, but, you know, I think it's kind of anything that's like, this is what I deserve, whether it actually is deserved or not. Like, you have to be willing to just like set it aside and take responsibility and do something. And like, that's what we're going to see, whether teams and players do that to remain wanting to be like in a high level of futsal and growing it in the States. Do you take that step and do that? And that's not to discount what kind of responsibility has been taken in the past, but it's like, obviously where we want to go, more has to be taken. And so you just have to count the costs and say, do you want to do that? At this point, I want to be able to go on the road to do commentary games, but there may come a time when I can't do that because obviously you guys can't do that right now because you have families and you live, much further away than I do. Maybe not the Cincinnati for you, Jake. I don't know. I don't know how close you are to Kentucky, but, at some point I may not be able to make that commitment, but I think that is huge for, the sustainability of a sport is the commitment and the response, taking responsibility to say, I'm going to do what I can to see what I can do. I heard it was actually, it did come from my brother, Jeremy. He was talking about one of his academies that he was coaching, and he would tell his players, like, they would get upset at something that's going on. And he would say, like, when that happens, like, ask yourself, what can you add to the game? And then later on in the game, like, he saw one of the players getting upset, he turns and looks at Jeremy and he goes, like, what can I add to the game? And it's like, I think it's so necessary in this time. It's like, as a player, as a, owner, as a member of the FCS Live, it's like, what can I add? Not what can I get, not what can I receive, and how can I benefit, and how can I be in the spotlight? How can I, it's like, how can I serve, and what can I do to, like, make this, an amazing thing? And that's one of the reasons why our team's been great, because I think we're full of people that are trying to do that. Like, Luke's having conversations with me that's like, he knows that his role will probably eventually become obsolete, right? As a remote person, right? And now we're finding ways that maybe it won't be, right? Like, maybe it won't be, because you might have, and we want that, but like, he has not been bottlenecking, because he's like, I want to, keep my part in this and it's like, we have people that are, I'm willing to give, and I'm willing to serve, and I'm willing to say, what can I add to this process? So I think that's going to be a huge piece of what we'll see emerging from the FCS, on a kind of a larger scale.
For sure.
Yeah. And for me, and this is another Jeremy quote that has stuck with me from the beginning to now, is like making those incremental improvements. And so we have to do that. The teams have to do that. The league has to do that. And I think so far we've done a pretty good job of that. I've seen the teams incrementally improve. I've seen us incrementally improve. And, that's going to be what's the steady, sustainable growth is just staying on pace, constantly improving what we're doing, and get there. And I think we're doing a good job of that so far. For a quick pat on the back without breaking my arm here, but I think that we found the right people, and I think that's so important right now because, like you said, the egos are really just eating our sport alive.
Mm-hmm.
Not just here, everywhere. And we see it in England. We see it here in the United States. We see it in a lot of countries where, people are more interested in being the guy or the person instead of actually making it about the sport. And I think we're seeing some teams really become likable by the fans, and we've I think grown a pretty fast following so far as well. I mean, when I think about the average viewers we have per stream that are tuning in and enjoying what we're doing, it's far surpasses what I expected for a first year on the channel, and not really advertising that we were going to do it either. I mean, the week of the home opener, we said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to be on YouTube." So, like, I think that's I think that says a lot about the fan base and the culture of futsal across the country and otherwise, that people are really excited to see something new and grow. And we have a passionate group of people involved in this sport across the globe, because in a lot of ways, there's something that I had a conversation with a guy in England on the channel about a couple of years ago was, only in futsal could this work this way, because people are just so fanatical about the sport. Like, it's a kind of passion you don't see anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So I think that says a lot about our community, and they deserve some accolades and some respect too.
I think I'd like to echo what Jared says is, and Jake, we said this live on stream, I'm not here for FCS. I'm not here for NFPL. I'm not here for futsal news. The reason I got in this was for futsal, and I wanted to see it in the United States. And I watched Columbus. I remember Columbus futsal was one of the first streams I watched on Facebook. And I was like, this is awesome. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen, because they were the only ones, like, it was the only American thing streaming. And I was like, what can I do to help? What can I do to support you guys? Right. And I was always just like, I'll watch. I would share it out. And I was just like, let's make it big, because that's what I want to see, and one quote that's changed my life since college was, be the change you want to see. If you want something to change, like Jared, you said, what can you do to be part of the solution? And yeah, like I said, and like Jared said, egos is what's killing us. People grabbing at the pie that Jake and I talk about all the time, that there's no pie. There's nothing to grab right now, guys. Like, let's make futsal great. And then let's all figure out other things later. Like, futsal news can be the great commentary show, and I'll probably be dead by then, but that's okay.
One other thing, jeez, I'm sorry. I tried to move.
Hold it together, Jabroni. Come on.
Jabroni.
Come on.
I think one thing that we're going to do that's really exciting too, that I'm working on now and have bothered Jared with behind the scenes, is when we do these showcases, when the time comes as well, and kind of showcasing places outside of FCS and giving the futsal community credit in other parts of the country. So I know that we did a announcement on this channel kind of teasing that was coming, and I just want to give you guys an update. I feel like we're in a good place to give that update. Is we're on track, and I think that you guys will start to see something in the not so distant future about how that's developed. So really, really exciting stuff, bringing the futsal community together for the sake of futsal, like Luke said. And I think that's going to take us a long way. And it's an exciting project. It's daunting. It's a little bit scary with the amount of potential travel for some of us, but I think it could be really, really cool. So especially because it's evolved so much from what my original idea was that I shared with Jeremy, that started this whole journey with FCS for me. And so it's been fun to watch it kind of grow and evolve and almost come full circle in a couple of ways too. So a little bit of a teaser for you guys here at the end, that great things are coming, and that we're going to take you along for the ride. So with that in mind, Jared, thank you so much for spending time with us and talking about the league and talking about some of the behind the scenes with us. It was great to kind of chat in front of everybody and pull other people into our crazy conversations, but I'm most excited for what's to come. And I hope everybody out there watching is too.
Yeah, this is super fun. I really enjoyed this, talking with you guys about these things and the teams and what we're doing. And I absolutely agree. I mean, I think being excited for what's to come, we've said this at the end of some of the streams. We're like, man, we're excited to see this team play again. And I think I'm excited as well for what's to come, for sure.
Definitely. Good things are coming. I feel like this is a year of change for futsal in a lot of ways. So looking forward to it. Hey, just a quick note / warning, depending on how you see this, for Jared, but Rudy will be seeing you at the Olay game. So
nice.
Make sure you look out for him and say hi for me.
All right, Rudy. Can you come like with, like out the airport, you have like a sign that's like, this is who I'm here for, and this is what I am. Can you come with like, hi, I'm Rudy, and I'll be like, hey, this is the guy. All right, sweet.
Oh, you guys, if that happens, I need a picture. By the way,
there's a high likelihood that will happen.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I got to see Rudy. Quick side note: last summer, I actually vacationed up to Michigan, which probably gives most
vacation to Michigan.
I know. Oh, yeah, Ohioans typically don't travel north unless they're going to Boo. But we went to just south of Grand Rapids in is it Saugatuck, right on the lake there? What's that famous freshwater lake there on Lake Michigan? I'm drawing a blank.
I mean, it might be Saugatuck. Saugatuck is
Beach.
One of the places that people go to a lot, so it's up there. It's a good chance it could be the place.
I'm pretty sure. I just didn't know if I pronounced it right, but
Saugatuck is how you pronounce it. At least that's how I've heard it. So
we've got those towns named after Native Americans down here too. So I'm a champion of Cuyahoga, which is spelled no way like it sounds, and some others. But
nice.
Saugatuck was a new one for me, but I've loved it. It reminded me a little bit of a couple towns over from me that's a lake town. So we took the girls up there and got to have dinner with Rudy, and that was a really good time and catching up with him. So good friend, not only to the channel, but to me personally. So good to see you tonight, Rudy.
Shout out, Rudy.
And shout out to everybody else in the chat that joined us and chimed in. We appreciate all you guys. Make sure that you join us in our Discord, our Futsal News Discord, where we share links to not only American futsal games, but to games we find on YouTube around the globe. Luke, lately it's been Italian? I feel like we've seen a lot of Italian futsal recently.
A lot of Italian.
And some Thai league, as well as Argentina when they're playing, especially since I'm biased to San Lorenzo here. But yeah, I appreciate you guys as always. Make sure you join us. If you haven't and you enjoy this content, like and subscribe. We'll do more interviews. I think I've got a really exciting one teed up for February. I just got to confirm a couple things. So keep an eye out for that. And until we talk to you guys on the next stream, don't forget to play with your soul.